All right, guys. Our next guest is the boxing coach to such fighters such as BJ Penn, Tito Ortiz, Michael Bisping, and Cris Cyborg, amongst others. With a massive 2016, he is looking to have another stellar year in 2017 with some big fights on the horizon. Jason Parillo, welcome back to Submission Radio. It's great to have you, Coach.
What's up, fellas? How you guys doing?
Doing good, man. Always well when you come on the program. And we were on Parillo Boxing on Instagram, and every time we go on, it is a literal who's who of MMA fighters training with you right now. You got TJ Dillashaw, you got RDA, Michael Bisping, of course, a regular customer. Tell us, what has the last year been like for you? Because it seems like you're in even higher demand than usual.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, it's funny thing is I've always been in the gym. I've always been holding the hand pads. I've always, back even when I boxed myself, I've always been training people. I mean, yeah, it's a little different, and the names are a little bigger, and it's a little bigger, high-profile fight, So obviously the guys that are in there draw a little more attention. But realistically, whether it's who's who in the zoo or whatever, I mean, most likely I'm probably sitting in the gym holding hand pads regardless. So I mean, it's exciting. I enjoy working with the high-profile guys, the high-level guys that are looking to gain those extra inches to get to the highest levels that they can get to. So, it makes, obviously it makes what I'm doing, I feel like I'm getting the final end of what you're looking for as a coach, and that's world champions.
Multiple world champions. Let's get into the world of MMA because, of course, there's some big fights coming up for you. First of which is the Michael Bisping fight with GSP in November. We saw you spend some time with GSP and Mike recently on Instagram. What's your relationship like with George? Because it seems like everyone's getting along really well going into this one.
Well, yeah. I mean, everybody's a professional. Everybody's been in high-profile fights that's involved, so they get it. I mean, what happens, out here in the smoke and mirror era where it's not actually in the cage or in the ring where they're fighting. I mean, that's when all the talk and all the, animosity, anger, niceness, whatever's going on between the two fellas that are fighting. I mean, that all goes out the fucking window now, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. As soon as the guys get in the ring and start fighting, or in the cage rather.
Yeah.
But I mean, George, I've been in a high-profile fight with George before with BJ Penn, when BJ Penn came up from lightweight and challenged him for his welterweight title, and that was a lot of hoopla as well. We did a 3-week press tour and traveled all over the place, Canada to Hawaii to Vegas. And, so I've been around George before. We're amicable. I mean, there's not, hi, how are you? It's not like there's a relationship there. But Bisping, gets into anybody's head that he's fighting. So there's always going to be a little bit of banter and a little bit of fun shit talking going on, sure.
What's it like preparing for this version of George? Because I feel like back when you were preparing him with BJ Penn, you knew what you were getting, but now you got this kind of there's question marks all around George. He's been out for a while. He's at a different weight class. We don't really know what he's going to look like, let alone look like at middleweight. Can you take a lot of what you sort of learned about George in the past, or do you sort of feel like you're starting fresh? And not to mention that you're training, a completely different fighter in Bisping to fight George.
Well, of course, yeah. And yeah, I mean, you got to figure he added some wrinkles to his game. I mean, he got to. I mean, 4 years, he definitely seems like the type of guy that has been still in the gym and staying loyal to his craft, because he knew in the back of his mind there would be a day where he'd want to come back. I mean, I believe when he originally left, he always knew in the back of his mind that he was going to come back. For some odd reason, he wants to take on Michael Bisping. That's for some reason in the back of his mind is his best choice, and he feels like that's going to showcase whatever he's been trying to develop over the last 4 years. But I mean, really, we got to get Michael to fight his fight for the most part. I mean, we got to be prepared for everything. George is a well-rounded guy. He can punch, he can kick, he obviously can grapple very well. Hell of a wrestler. I mean, that's what kept his titles for all those years. That's why we got to be prepared for everything. I mean, of course, you go back and you look at a guy's habits and what he naturally does, and I don't know how much George is going to be able to change, some of his habits. But our guess is he's definitely going to add some stuff to his arsenal.
And you kind of hit the nail on the head there, Coach, when you said that George was really focused on getting this fight with GSP. It really seemed like that was the only fight he was really considering coming back for, which kind of, for a lot of fans, was a curious situation, because here he is, a welterweight going up to middleweight to fight Bisping, and really the only fight that he was really interested in. Have you and Bisping had that conversation and kind of spoken about why, I suppose, Bisping is at the top of his list and why he's so adamant about getting this Bisping fight? Because it is a bit of a strange kind of matchup for George to come back to and be so focused on.
Yeah, I mean, of course we've had that conversation. I mean, how can you not have that conversation? There is there's a little bit of a strange obsession there, because, there's obviously a lot of other opportunities that he can probably try to get going and bring to the table, but his eyes is set on Bisping. Obviously, he doesn't want to, he was a fairly big welterweight, and he obviously didn't want to deal with that. I'm sure that weight cut was a consistent issue for him. And the middleweight division is just a lot of big beasts. I mean, all the guys that Bisping's been beaten over the last, 5-6 fights have been all very big men. I mean, much bigger men than George, or bigger than Bisping. So, he probably knows he wants to go to welterweight. I mean, he sees money there. He sees a high-profile guy, a guy that draws a lot of attention, a fight that can generate a lot of money, and a guy that, in his mind he feels he can beat. I know that they've trained together 10, 11 years ago, and I know at the time he was getting the better of Bisping in the gym as far as the wrestling was concerned. I know the stand-up didn't go George's way from what I understand, but the wrestling game definitely was in George's favor quite a bit.
Sorry, just to confirm, Jason, did you say the stand-up game went George's way or Bisping's way? I just want to confirm.
Bisping's way.
Okay, yeah.
From what I understand.
Yep.
Yeah. I could have said GSP. I don't know what I said. I just started rambling, for God's sakes. But yeah, I mean, there's something that he sees. I mean, he's definitely fighting a bigger guy, but not the biggest middleweight out there. I mean, Bisping's definitely a bigger guy than George, but not like I said, our last 4, 5, 6 opponents have been other than let me take that back. Dan Henderson was probably smaller than both. Dan Henderson's got there's something weird to Dan Henderson, man. You don't really know how big that guy is. You can't tell. I mean, he looks like sometimes I look at him and I'm like, he's my size? For God's sake, what the fuck? And then he's big. He's knocking out guys like Fedor, for God's sake. So he's kind of he's a difficult example to compare him to anybody, really, for the most part. But, with that style and that size, it's nice that we were just in front of a guy like Dan Henderson, because, he's a wrestler, obviously different athlete than George, but he's got a lot more threatening tools, I believe, and I felt Michael handled that fight quite well and dominated Dan. I know there's some controversy there, because when you see a guy go down, there's always going to be some controversy there. But yeah, I mean, George thinks that he can beat Mike, and if you ask me, George's biggest, I mean, what I can take out of George and studying George in the past and looking at George now as a welterweight, what really, I mean, especially in his last fight with like Johnny Hendricks, what's really wins him fights too at the end of the day, especially in these 5-round fights, is his endurance. Obviously he's got a strong work ethic, but like that last fight with Johnny Hendricks, you'd fall behind the first couple rounds, and then you just see Johnny completely flatten out, start pawing his punches, and just not having the same zip on anything he was doing. And George just took over, and he took over on conditioning, he took over on athleticism, and he took over on size as well. And he doesn't have any of that with Michael. He's not going to have conditioning with Michael. He might be able to. I don't even think he matches Michael's conditioning. Michael is a conditioning animal, and he's got a heart for days, and he goes for days. So it's real interesting that he really wanted to make this fight for himself.
It is. And the other thing that we want to touch on is obviously Michael making some headlines this week when he was on the MMA Hour, and he mentioned, win or lose, this may be his final fight. When did you first find out that this was his plan, Jason?
You just told me right now.
Well, there you go.
I did read that.
News. How do you feel about that? He's saying he might retire after this fight.
Yeah, in all respect, Michael, it's his call. I mean, God bless. He's had a career where he makes he gets to make his last decision on that. And, I'm sure he's got a lot of people, if you care about somebody and you see him have the type of career that Michael has, you think to yourself, you did it. You could finish on top and you can walk away, on your own terms. So, that's Mike's call. And I hope Michael does walk away on top. And whatever decision he makes, I completely support him.
And obviously he mentioned he's got a lot of projects coming up next year, a lot of film projects, entertainment projects, and exactly like he said, going out on top, sounds good to him. But I'm wondering, because his career has gone for a really long time. You guys have been together for a really long time. We know he's had some injury issues and dips in his run. Have you guys ever spoken about retirement before? Or is this sort of the first time that you're really sort of hearing these headlines of him considering retirement?
No, of course. You talk to any fighter after they've been doing it as long as Mike's been doing it. That conversation is going to come up. How can it not? This is not the funnest game in the world. Yeah, guys are, love the attention. They love the fame, the money, the excitement and the challenge. All that's a big love, but it's also a real drag too. It's a little bit of a depressing game, and it's the loneliest sport in the world. It really is. Fighting's not a fun deal. And every guy, guys in their 20s are talking about retiring, and they've only had a handful of fights. It's a tough game. You gotta respect a man like Mike that's done it as long as he has, and he really can make any decision he would like to make about that. Anybody else's opinions really doesn't matter, because he's been the one that's been doing it for as long as he has. He's the one that's made the sacrifices with his family, with his friends, with everything in his life. So, if he started getting that momentum going that direction, it's definitely a thought, and why wouldn't it be a thought in his head? He's done enough. He really has. And that's why he deserves a fight like a Georges St-Pierre fight, which is a high-profile fight, should generate a lot of money. And it's a competitive fight. GSP is a favorite of the fight as well, so you can't knock Bisping for taking this fight. If Bisping's a 7-1 favorite, talk shit on the guy. Say, what the hell are you doing? Come on, fight this guy, fight that guy. And if you look at the division, it's all over the board. So the fight makes sense, actually, at the end of the day. And if he's the underdog, you can't talk shit to him for taking the fight. So regardless, he deserves a good fight, a good high-profile fight, a good paying fight, and then he can make whatever decisions he'd like to do.
And of course, the other interesting thing about this is in interviews, GSP has said that if he loses this fight, he may stop fighting as well. He may retire as well. So have you heard those comments from GSP? And what do you think about the possibility of a double retirement in November at UFC 217?
Oh, what a pain in the ass that would be for the middleweight division. Wow, that'd be pretty exciting. Well, because I think that's the pressure that George wants to put on himself. That's the type of competitor he is. He's just like, yeah, I'm going to show, you heard his interview, I'm going to be the better Georges St-Pierre than I was in the past, blase, what he says. And, he's a thinker, so he knows if he comes out and he is a performer, or if he wants to perform and he gets outclassed or beat really badly, my guess is you can see the retirement. He had the opportunity also and the option to go back down to 170 if things don't go his way with this fight as well. But he's not the youngest guy in the world anyways either. He's 35, 36 years old. What is he? 35 or 36 years old, and taking some time off, and he's had a lot of fights and a long career. So, a double retirement, I don't know. Realistically, I'll shoot you straight too. Getting Mike, even if he does retire, seeing Mike retire altogether is going to be an interesting thing, because Mike does love the fist fight, man. That's something that he lives, breathes, and loves to do. So, a double retirement would be fucked on the middleweight division, but yay, how exciting.
Well, speaking about the middleweight division, as Aussies, we'd get killed if we don't ask this. Where does this leave Robert Whittaker? I know, because a lot of people are wondering, first of all, the guys were supposed to fight each other in Melbourne, UFC 193. That, of course, fell through. Unfortunately, Mike had to get an injury fixed up. And now a lot of people are really looking forward to possibly that fight being unified. So have you and Mike spoken about Rob? And is there any real interest from him in fighting him? Because Of course, there's the argument of, Rob's a fairly new name in the game. It isn't a big fight like the GSP fight, not as much money to be made. So maybe there's a little bit less motivation in fighting a guy like Rob after GSP.
Well, I mean, yeah, but, Rob's earned it now, didn't he? He took on a couple challenges there, and he won them in a high fashion. And, the guy obviously shows a lot of character. I like his personality, man. He seems like a really down-to-earth guy. And, maybe because of how quick he struck it and how quick he got there, he's able to keep his humility and his character right now. Hopefully that doesn't change because he seems like a pretty solid guy. Yeah, why wouldn't it interest? I mean, all fights are interesting to Mike. If again, I say it time and time in the interviews, I've never heard of Mike turning down any type of fight. So, that's the way, if that's where the promotion wants to go and that's what makes the most sense, and Mike's still excited about fighting and wants to continue his career, then I think that'd be an exciting fight. I mean, why not? I like Whittaker, and I think he does. I think he's been a fan of Michael, to be totally honest. When I hear him talk and when I see him talk to Mike, it sounds to me like he really has a lot of respect for Mike, and I respect that as well, and fuck, he deserves it.
And speaking of respect, obviously, one fight where there's not really any love lost is obviously Luke Rockhold. He had a fight this weekend against David Branch. Just curious what you thought of Luke's performance. There was a lot of criticism regarding Luke's striking, even though he did get the win in the end. I'm just curious what you thought, and also how likely it is that there is ever a trilogy fight, between Bisping and Rockhold, because they're at one apiece at the moment. And I get the sense that, Bisping loves sort of dangling this fight in front of Luke's face just to sort of mess with him.
Yeah, sure. Well, there's another. I mean, probably unfortunately for Robert Whittaker, that fight could probably rush to the table quicker. But we could be honest too as well. Whittaker's got that title, so yeah. I mean, of course, that's good for Rockhold. He showed some composure. He got hurt, he got rocked, and he was able to, the other guy in my opinion, got a little too excited. He could have settled down a little bit and probably did, capitalize on the where he had Rockhold in that first round. But, to me, he got a little overzealous and a little excited, and Rockhold kept his composure, kept cool and calm, and took over, and did it earn him an immediate shot at the title? I don't know about that. I mean, but you never know who gets the title shot, really, sometimes. So you got to just sit back and wait.
And, of course, fans wondering what a third fight would look like. How do you think a rubber match would go down? How do you think it would play out if he did fight Bisping one more time?
Yeah, well, especially coming after that last fight, I think Mike beats him again. If Mike does it, he's a little suspect there. I think Mike, if Mike gets to his beard, he can get to him again the same way he did before. I mean, you do it once, you can do it again. But Mike can beat him in the long haul as well. If they go in the later rounds, that's where Mike really takes over most of his fights. So, of course, the way my mind works is my fighter will win that fight, and I believe that. So, that's my opinion.
Appreciate it, Jason. We really appreciate the time. We'll let you go in a moment. Before we do, obviously, we've got to touch on the other big fight at the moment. Actually, got a lot of big fighters, but we'll touch on one more, and that's Cris Cyborg, of course. A lot of hype at the moment, potentially about Cris Cyborg versus Holm at UFC 219. Nothing official. Can you tell us, have you heard any news from Cris, if the UFC have sent out an offer finally, to Holm yet for this to happen?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, there's something getting worked out. I mean, Cris is a champion, and she's a high profile, but she's in the midst of being a very high profile fighter. I should say she's at the even though she's been doing a long time, she's been a champion as long as she has, and I'm sure it's tiring, but she's at the beginning stage of her high profile status. I mean, so and I think. I know she had the last couple of fights have been kind of a coming out party for her, and everybody getting to know who exactly she is. But a fight with Holly Holmes would be amazing, and I think that would bring a lot of eyes, a lot of attention, and everybody will see exactly what she can do. This last fight, we fought a really awkward girl in Tanya Evinger, and a tough, terrible girl. I think will actually do pretty good if they keep her around because. she's a strong girl with a big punch and a lot of heart. But some people, I mean, even you heard Ronda Rousey's coach talking about it. I've heard Holly Holm's coach talk about Cris as if they feel like they've seen something that they can beat, and quite cute to me. And I like listening to their opinion about it because, truth's in the pudding, and hopefully Holly takes that fight. And I would love people. I love when people eat their words because to talk about Cris being slow, she's got great speed for a woman for her weight class. She's got great reflexes. She's a hell of a fighter. You fight an awkward, gangly, big-hearted, tough, durable girl like Tanya Ebinger. There could be some awkward moments in there, so you can think maybe there's some holes there, but there's really not. Cris continues to sharpen her game time and time again. She's out in Thailand right now on vacation, but a big part of her vacation is training. That's what she does. She's constantly focused on being the best in the world. And she's younger than these girls, and she's younger than Holly, and she's got a lot more left in the tank than Holly does. So, I appreciate too, because I heard a little shit talking coming on their end, and I appreciate that, because what that does for me, it makes my job a lot easier. It really, lights the fire. It wakes up the lion and really gets some motivation going over here on this side. So, God bless. I hope that fight happens, because you're going to see exactly who Cris is, because you're going to see a girl that, at this point is not, in my opinion, not at the best she's ever been, but a lot of people know who she is, and, she's a preacher daughter. I personally like her. I think she's a nice person, but she's going to be biting off a lot more than she can chew, when she comes in this fight.
And I want to touch on some of the comments that you mentioned, especially from Coach Edmond, Ronda Rousey's coach. But quickly, while we're still on this matchup, the big question is, striking-wise, who's going to have the advantage in this fight? Because obviously Holly Holm, multiple-time world champion when it comes to boxing, great footwork. But obviously Cris Cyborg, a devastating, knockout puncher, compared to the Mike Tysons of the world, finishing girls early, just devastating strike, and also showed that she could be quite calculating in her last fight, UFC 214. So who do you think has the advantage on the feet in this one?
I know Cris has the advantage of the feet. I mean, I know that Holly has a long career and has had her multiple boxing world titles, and she's done very well. That's how she wins her fight in MMA too. But if I stop and look back at her last fight with that Beth Carrera or whatever her name is, mm-hmm. I mean, she's sitting in front of a girl that is taking fitness classes. You're sitting in front of somebody. That's not what you're sitting in front of when you're sitting in front of Cris Cyborg. Cris Cyborg knows how to make people miss. She knows how people make people pay, and she's devastating, like you said, with her power. I mean, yeah, again, she's going to be biting off more than she can chew. She can't stand with Cris. She's not going to be able to do that. She's not going to be able to roll with Cris. Obviously, she's going to be trying to set up her big left kick most of her fight. That's where she's got most of her weight in her shots, is that big kick. She's got a decent straight left hand. But, people don't realize how good of a punch Cris takes as well. I put her in there with men that let her have it, and she eats it up and puts it right back on them. So it's hard for me to get my mind wrapped around anybody in MMA right now being better than Cris on their feet, because I don't think the girls out there. There's girls with accolades, and I look at a girl like Joanna Champion who's got accolades and has a lot of, she puts stuff together maybe a little bit more, but most smaller people do. Most smaller fighters have the agility and the athleticism to show more dynamics in their striking, But in all realness, as far as the MMA game is concerned, Cris is the best on her feet as far as women are concerned.
And just, sort of going off of that, talking about how Cris is the best on the feet, and you mentioned it before, Ronda Rousey's coach, Edmond Tarverdyan, just the other day on the MMA Hour, saying that he still wants Ronda to fight Cris Cyborg, and, like you mentioned, he said that he believes Cyborg is too slow. What do you sort of think when you hear that? And I guess one thing that comes to my mind is that in some ways, do you think that's a little bit irresponsible as from a coaching perspective when you see how Ronda went in her last two fights to now say, I want my fighter to go up in weight and fight an arguably an even more devastating striker in Cris Cyborg? Do you think there's a bit, I don't know, I guess a certain amount of care that should be taken in that sense?
Well, I mean, that's the way he works. You know, you can't. I mean, when a coach is talking about his fighter, you don't know how what works for them. You know, and maybe that's how he gets her motivated and gets her pumped up and believing in herself, listening to him, believe in her. I don't know. They gave. Is it better to say we would never want to fight Cris Cyborg because she'd fucking kill us? You know what I mean? Like, it's probably not good to say that. It's probably pretty irresponsible as well. So if you got to say something, you're probably better off not putting Cris Cyborg's name in your mouth, probably. That probably would be the best thing to do, because really, I mean, as far as being responsible or irresponsible and stuff, you know, putting your fighter in a situation where they haven't been in the situation, but they have been successful in the last couple of situations, you probably want to, you know, wipe off, you know, get them running again a little bit. But, you know, that's not, it's not for me to say how he talks and handles his fighters. It's really not, you know, and I've heard this guy get a lot of backlash and a lot of shit. And if you ask me, he doesn't see, I mean, he has his system that he has with his fighters, and I'm sure we don't know about all the success he has, because there probably has been quite a bit of success that we don't know about. And a lot of failures, just like all us coaches. We have ups and downs. I mean, we're only as good as the fighter that we're dealing with, really. You know, but I mean, we got to be able to develop and make him better. And I don't know if he does that or how he does that. He was doing something like for a while with Ronda, but you know, as far as putting Cris Cyborg's name in his mouth, that's not a good idea. You know, and God bless him. You know, if who else you're going to call out, you should call out probably the girl that one of the last two girls that he fought. Those would probably be a better call out. It'd be more of an even matchup, because the girl that he's calling out in Cris Cyborg, I believe, would be in an old school back when Mark Coleman was doing it back in the day. I see Cris Cyborg being all three of those girls in the same night, and I'm being serious when I say that. I believe that, and that's the type of heart that Cris Cyborg has, this type of ability she has, the type of strength, and the type of endurance she does. She's really a special fighter, you know. And unfortunately, and fortunately, because you know what it's been like trying to get fights for Cris Cyborg, it's a motherfucker. You know, leading up to, you say, thank God we're in the UFC, because now we got the ultimate promotion that can draw a lot more attention, a lot more girls, and a lot more opportunities for Cris. Because Cris doesn't get, you know, Cris would love to. I mean, as active as she is in the gym, she could fight 3-4 times a year, but she doesn't. And it's not because of the lack of wanting to do it. It's more of getting the opponents to fight. So if we got Edmond and we got, you know, Holly Holm's team and everybody's team going, wait a minute, you know, maybe we can beat her, and let's say we can beat her, and now you gotta cash the check that your mouth just fucking, you know, you just open up your mouth, you know, now you gotta do something, which is exciting to me. Please look at the last fight of Cris Cyborg. Please, Holly Holmes. Please, Edmund and Winklejohn and the guys that talk negative about Cris and talk about how they think their fighter can beat Cris. Please take that fight. Please sign the line. Please make that happen. We would love that. That gives us the attention that Cris deserves. That gives Cris the light that she needs to be in for everybody to know exactly who she is and how bad she is.
Well said, Coach. Well, it's exciting times for Jason Parillo and his team of world-class fighters. Guys, make sure to follow Jason on Instagram at Parillo Boxing. Go check out his website, ParilloBoxing.com. Jason, as always, a real pleasure to have you on the program. We know you're a busy guy. Thanks for squeezing us in. All the best, and I'm sure we'll be speaking to you soon. There's a lot of exciting things happening.
All right, fellas. Casper and Dennis, take it easy, guys.